Welcome everyone to the Berggruen Forum. I have just one announcement today. I have two announcements. Tonight, Friday night and Saturday night is an evening of dance put on by Alfred University's Division of Performing Arts. The concert will include works by two Marlon Miller guest artists and dances choreographed by Chase Ainger and Colleen Wall and by several AU students. And that happens at 8 p.m. in the Miller Theatre tonight, Friday night, Saturday night. And the second announcement is that next week's Berggruen Forum on February the 24th, Mina Sadagat, Jew, and Anton Puvaraja, they are giving a talk entitled Empowering Underserved and Underrepresented Students Through Computational Thinking and Modeling. And so that promises to be very interesting. Today, we are really happy to have Mark Lewis, Dean of the Business College, and Andrew Kless, Professor of History and Global Studies, and some of the students who recently went with them on a trip to Germany. And they're going to be telling us about that trip and their experiences. So thank you, Mark, and take it away.
Thank you so much. Let me do a screen share and we'll get started. And I'm recording this, so I'll minimize. Let me go back up to the top page. Page up, come on, wake up. All right, so this is a conversation about our German auto and history class. Andrew Kless and I and 17 students went to Germany in January as an Allen term class. For today's outline, I'll begin the presentation. Andrew will talk about, and I'll talk about the course in general. Andrew will talk about history, and then Liz Schumacher and Paul Bolden will talk about the history, their experiences on the history part, and Charles Murphy and CJ Duggan will talk about their German auto experiences, and then we'll wrap. So to me, one of the most interesting things about these courses that we ran together was that it was not just a class, but we really got immersed in the German college student life. Our students were in the classroom. They were accompanied by AU students, had German students with them the whole time. The classes there run from 9 to 5 with a lunch break, and they were in the same room for 3 days, 9 to 5. Our students worked in teams with German students doing an international business competition. They had lunch, they had dinner with the students, they went out in the evenings with the students. And the beauty of this course is that we use the English language. German fluency was not required, but our students did, some of them have taken German here at AU, and we all did some practice learning prior to going. Most of our time was in the state of Baden-Württemberg in southern Germany. And when we landed in Frankfurt and took a bus down to Stuttgart, which is home of Mercedes-Benz. Our first day was there. Most of our time was spent in Heidenheim, which is to the east of Stuttgart. That's a university town. We'll show some photos in a minute of that. One of the first things that we noticed different, though, when we got off our bus in Stuttgart was the Germans take their COVID protocols much more seriously than we have been taking them in the US. Our students were all, a requirement of this trip was that we not only had to have our COVID vaccinations, but that we were all boosted. All of our students except one were boosted. That student did not have the elapsed time since their first two initial shots. Everybody else was boosted. And we had our CDC cards proving that, but that meant nothing basically in Europe. And so our first stop in Stuttgart was to go to a pharmacy, and we had to register for a European certificate that included a QR code, and that was required to go into any restaurant, hotels. Going in the door, you had to show your code, and if you didn't have the code, you had to have proof of a negative COVID test in the prior 24 hours. So if you don't want to get immunized, but you want to go to a restaurant or a hotel, you're going to get a COVID test every day. In Austria, even to go into a grocery store required the QR code or a negative COVID test in the prior 24 hours. And for many The sign on the bottom right. They had a three-way requirement, your initial 2 shots plus your booster, and required either a KN95 or an N95 mask. So if you tried to walk into an establishment with the full surgical mask, cloth mask, out the door, just simply not acceptable. So that was one of the first things that we noticed when we were there. Our second day, we went to the medieval city, Rotenburg on the Tauber. Beautiful city. This is one of the most iconic pictures of Germany, is 2 city gates to the walled city. It's a walled city. We walked on part of the wall. So that was an experience. We had a tour with a tour guide. Because of COVID, this had been her second tour in 2 years. There had been a group 2 or 3 weeks ahead of us, but basically no tours. So we found that Europe was just sort of coming out of the COVID kind of lockdowns that we've been coming out of. We took a group picture just outside City Hall. And just after this picture, there was a protest with 4 protesters and speeches protesting against immunization requirements. So we just missed the protest and the police action when we got this picture taken. Heidenheim is the university town where we spent most of our time. This is the pedestrian walking zone in town, and a statue of the dumpling lady. And Heidenheim is the dumpling town. Ask one of the students the story of the dumplings and they'll tell you that. Above the town, this is just a few feet from the last picture, is the Castle Hellenstein, Schloss Hellenstein, overlooking the town. We walked up there, up to get there. Quite an uphill walk. And then from there, we could look down and look at the downtown right below in the picture. About midway in the picture, there's one black building that stands out between 2 hills. And that's actually the university building where we spent most of our time. Our first morning, this was the classroom that the students used. Our first morning, Liz and Charles, 2 students that will be talking with you today, gave a presentation on Alfred University and our geographic area and New York State, so that the German students would have more background about us and who we were. And by the way, for the German students, this was their first day back in class in a year and a half. They had been remote for a year and a half, and the day we arrived was their first day back to physical classes. So at AU, we'd been in class for a long time, but it was not that way. It was not allowed in Germany. So here's students, the beautiful classroom, 2 stories high, glass windows. Hard not to be distracted when you're working in the classroom when it's that beautiful outside. On Thursday, we did a tour of the Mercedes factory. Unfortunately, we can't take pictures, none of the companies allow us to take pictures inside, but we could get a picture outside of our group. Liz is holding the AU pennant there in the bottom of the Mercedes star. So this was us after we finished our factory tour. One thing that we did see in the factory tour was the extensive use of robotics in building the bodies for the Mercedes cars. And it was like a dance, like theater, watching these robots welding and picking up these bodies and moving them. In some cases, one case, we walked through kind of a tunnel and the robots were passing car bodies over our heads from one workstation to the next. Really a fascinating thing to watch. After visiting the Mercedes plant, we went to see the Mercedes Museum. It's kind of hard to see from this picture, but below the museum, that's our group. It's kind of dark there, but we got another group photo in front of the museum. Museum had the history from the first gasoline engine all the way, and not only a history of vehicles, but a history of what society, what was happening at different periods of time from the late 1800s through today. In the wintertime, I'm reminded, of snow plows around Alfred. This is in the Mercedes Museum. This is a snow blower truck on display in the museum. So Some places get a lot more snow than we do, and a plow isn't satisfactory. They have to have snow blower trucks to blow the snow. After our time in Heidenheim and in Stuttgart, we went on to Munich. This is the new city hall. This is not the old city hall. Looks pretty old to me, but it's the new city hall, and Marienplatz, the most central downtown part of Munich. We had a dinner at Augustiner Keller, which has been in business since the late 1300s. And then that's sort of the things that we did as a group. I'd like to turn it over now to Andrew to talk about the special parts that the history class did.
Yeah, Mark, can you go back one slide?
Certainly.
So in this picture too, there are German students from the university that met us in Munich. So they traveled, I think around 10 of them traveled to Munich just to hang out with our students for this Augustiner Keller evening. I think Jürgen, who's our German host, had his friends. I brought a German friend from my doctoral studies in Germany. And so it was a huge gathering of like all of our German friends, from the past, from just this trip, and really special. Next slide.
Yeah, let me wake it up here. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, so for the first time ever, we had a history class that joined the long-running German Autos business class. And for the history class, I was thinking of it when I conceived of it initially, and I gave it a title of Blood and Iron, Forging Modern Germany. I was thinking something about the working class and National Socialism and all of this kind of hardened labor stuff. But then I realized that the people taking the class, we had 2 art and design majors, Liz, who's an art history minor. It'd be more interesting to actually focus on art and kind of running into some of the things I'm doing right now with cultural heritage for the Army. And so we kind of pivoted to more of an art focus during the trip. And so this is in Stuttgart. This is the kind of Royal Square. But next slide, right after we took this photo, we went into the Kunstmuseum Stuttgart, and it has a huge collection of Otto Dix, and I love Otto Dix. He's a World War I painter, and after the war in Weimar Republic, he paints all of these scenes that I use in my classes, history classes. And so this is one of our art and design students, Natalie, in front of Otto Dix's Metropolis. So for me, it was a treat to actually see all of this work by Dix. Next slide. In Munich too, so all around Munich, we kind of stayed with that theme of art. Right before we went to the English Gardens, we went to the Alta Pinakothek, which is the old, Renaissance era, 18th century, 19th century, old masters type of art gallery in Munich, and then went to the same places that some of these German painters were painting scenes of the English Garden. So we had a nice gallery day, a nice walk around the gardens. Next slide. Okay, well, so before Liz, I pass it off to Liz. I'll just say that this trip worked pretty well, and I do wonder if it would be just as well taught as a global studies class or an art history, cross list too. So that's kind of where I'm thinking about it for the future. That there are lots of, this wasn't just about history. It really merged into lots of other disciplines. Liz, you're up.
All right, so I'm Liz. I am a global studies major with minors in art history and anthropology. And I went on this trip for the history aspect, as well as wanting to see different like art pieces, as well as cathedrals, which we got to see 2 beautiful cathedrals. If you want to go to the next slide, that works. So these are just some pictures I took around Kirchgenheim. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly. We went on a walking tour with our German advisor, Jürgen, and he took us through this older German town And afterwards we went to a really nice like little kind of like local spot that provided us with mulled wine, which was absolutely delicious. And we got to talk with some of the locals and just had a really good time. And then probably one of my favorite parts of the entire trip was going to Rotenburg. Just I am a huge medieval person, so seeing this town that was just wonderfully kept, and just walking through the streets and seeing pretty much history preserved was an absolute treat. And in the one picture, you see a kind of like dark building between two lighter buildings, and that's like the oldest cafe in Rotenburg. And not only that, but a couple of us went inside to kind of warm up and have just like a little cafe experience. And we didn't even know it was part of the walking tour. We went before that. So we were like, oh yeah, we went in there. It was really nice. And they had a lot of taxidermy in there, which was really interesting. So can go to the next slide. So this is the one cathedral in Munich that we went to, and I was completely stunned. I want to especially focus like my art history on, or like my art history studies on medieval as well as Renaissance like era artworks as well as cathedrals during this time. So this was an absolute treat because the plaster work inside was absolutely gorgeous. And I will admit I shed a few tears walking inside because I was so happy. I was like, oh my God. But it was just the scale of the cathedral itself, you cannot put into words. I mean, it is just so amazing. Next slide. And then there's Paul and I looking up at the ceiling. There's a beautiful domed ceiling, and just all of the plasterwork, like it goes all the way up. So, and it's really intricate. There were plaster statues that were just absolutely wonderful, really detailed. So yeah, and next slide. All right, I'm gonna pass it to Paul.
I just want to test, is my audio coming through all right? Okay.
Clear.
All right, so my name is Paul Bolden. I'm a second year political science and history major. And like Dr. Kless said, this trip was not focused solely on one thing, which I thought was a very unique take on this course, because we, like Liz said, we focused on like art history in Stuttgart, Rotenburg, and Munich. We also focused on the kind of period of German reunification, and then eventually into the rise of the Third Reich, and then eventually the reunification of Germany after the fall of the Soviet Union and East Germany. So actually, I think the next couple of slides are just a couple of photographs I took of the concentration camp in Dachau, which is just outside of Munich. This was actually the second time I visited a concentration camp memorial. The first one I visited was Mauthausen in Austria, and there's no real way to describe being at a concentration camp memorial. I don't think the term haunting fits enough. It's just you go in and it's dead silent. So I mean, it's eerie just being in a location where and the entire world knows that horrible things happened here. So it was very eye-opening to see just like how close it was to this major city, Munich, because we took I think it was a 10-minute train ride to the city of Dachau, and then just a short little walk over. And it's just like I never knew that I was that close. So again, it was a fantastic sight to see. It was, again, just very eye-opening. And I think it was something that was worth seeing with the history course for this trip. And that's just my little spiel on how this course went.
Thank you, Paul. Charles?
Hello, everyone. My name is Charlie Murphy. I'm an MBA student at AU and also completed my bachelor's in mechanical engineering last year. So this was a pretty incredible trip to be on, to be a part of. There was a great intersection between the history, engineering, the art, and then of course business. So it was a really incredible experience. I would love to go into the automotive manufacturing industry. So being able to go on this trip and seeing things such as manufacturing at Mercedes, all of the different history in the automotive industry was really incredible. I wish we could have taken pictures at Mercedes because that was truly my favorite part of the trip, seeing the automation is just incredible. Just starting out, this is a picture that I took in Rotenburg. A pretty interesting fact, on Sundays, things pretty much close down in Germany. Other than maybe a bakery or a cafe, you're not going to be able to go shopping, anything like that. We had heard some pretty mixed reviews from Germans themselves. Some absolutely loved it because it gave them a nice quiet day, and others not so much. They found it very inconvenient. But it was very interesting to see that that's how things go in Germany on Sundays. So again, this is a picture in Rotenburg at night. So you can see a little bit of the architecture. You can see the cobblestone streets. We heard quite about those and how they're trying to update the city to make it more accessible for folks, say, in wheelchairs with mobility issues, but they don't want to pave it. They want to keep these nice cobblestones. So they're just trying to update it in that same style. Right in the center of the picture, you can see a wrought iron sign. Something I really found interesting in the city is neon signs are illegal. They can't have neon signs. There was actually a McDonald's in the city at one point that has since left, but they couldn't have the standard golden arches. They had to have a wrought iron sign. And from what our tour guide said, it was rather beautiful for a McDonald's sign, but just a really great, beautiful walled city. If we could go to the next slide, please. And then Munich, it was really great to have that kind of juxtaposition between really old historic cities like Rotenburg, where it's quite medieval, and then to go to a modern city like Munich, but you still have the architecture like this, which is just incredible. Again, this is the new city hall, and this is what it looks like. So yeah, walking around here, seeing all the different vendors that were around, we were able to get lunch at a market right off of the main square here. Was absolutely incredible. And again, I'm not a huge city person, but being in Munich, it was actually enjoyable. Looking at the infrastructure that was there, similar to New York City, but better. Their subways are multiple stories, which is just really incredible here. Then you can see our German professor that was with us for most of our trip, Jürgen here, trying to give us some facts about the city. We go to the next slide again. So a lot of, again, the focus was on the German auto industry. So we visited a lot of museums, BMW, Porsche, Mercedes, which was really incredible. And this is us at the BMW Museum. You can see that we're on kind of a black elevated platform here, and there were a bunch of different cars around us. I think there were 8 on this platform, BMW 3 Series. And we were walking around the black platform, and the gentleman came in, said, you know, you can actually walk up on the platform and get closer to the cars. Oh, that was incredible. He left. And he came back with this massive wad of keys in his hand that was worth millions of dollars. It was like, I can start opening cars up for you, and you can actually check them out closer. We were like kids in a candy store. It was incredible. Again, engineers on the trip absolutely loved it. So this is one of the pictures that I took in the museums. I didn't want to flood us with pictures of cars, but I just wanted to mention that it was rather nice to have. And then I have one more slide, I believe. And then this is, again, that same overlook over Stuttgart, where we spent most of our time. It was pretty incredible to have undergrads, graduate students, history students, engineers. It was a great mix of people who might not have gotten together another way. But we were able to meet on this trip, make really great friends. And of course, there weren't Germans in this photo with us, but the German friends we were able to make on this trip are pretty great as well. I still keep in contact with multiple of them every day. So it's a great networking opportunity, but to also make friends around the world, that's not something you can really replicate. So yeah, for students who are looking to go on the trip, I would highly recommend it. I've been waiting to go on this trip for years. COVID made it difficult. And I'm very thankful that in my last year here at AU that I was able to do the trip. So thank you to all that made it possible.
Thank you. CJ, are you on? CJ, if you're on, you want to unmute yourself? Yeah, CJ had a class, but his class was out at 12:10, and he said he would join us afterwards. So something's happened.
He's saying his mic is not working. He'll rejoin.
Oh,
Let's come back to him.
okay. So when we were done in Munich, it was time to fly back to the States. Our itinerary had us flying into Charlotte. We had a several-hour layover and then flying into Rochester after that. We knew there was a big storm coming. Our pilot at the time we were over Philadelphia was told that Charlotte was closed, but it was going to reopen. So proceed, don't land in Philly at that big American hub, go on down and land in Charlotte. Well, as we got to Charlotte, Charlotte didn't open. And so our aircraft was diverted to Miami. So here we are flying into Miami, coming over Miami Beach as we're coming in for a landing. And because we didn't end up at the airport we were ticketed for, American Airlines had to put us up in a hotel. So we went to a Hampton Inn, very close to the ocean, very close to a marina. So this was a very nice marina near. And the next day, our students got to spend a day at Miami Beach. So while everybody here in Alfred on Monday before classes started Tuesday, as everybody was here getting ready for classes, our students were on the beach in Miami getting sunburned. And I am regretfully will say that that I was at the airport making arrangements so that we could fly back to Alfred. The airline originally had us flying back and arriving Wednesday night, and I didn't want students to miss classes for 2 days. And so I spent the day in the airport wangling us tickets to fly out on Tuesday. So I missed the beach, but the people who went to the beach reported that they had a fun time. And let me see how this works. And here's a street scene from Miami. I think that's Paul Bolden walking in right there.
It was pretty hard to chaperone the Miami Beach afternoon, Mark. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Andrew and I gave up on chaperoning on that day, and we just gave people a time to meet us back at the hotel. And we hoped and prayed that everybody would come back alive. We were very careful while we were in Germany to make sure that everyone stayed together and things were organized and on track, and we were all safe. But there was no way that was happening in Miami. So we just had to trust everybody to use their good judgment. The next slide in here, some fast facts, and then I'll talk a little bit about differences and let other folks talk about differences. These courses, our intention is to offer them every Allen term. They're 4 credit hours. The fee, with the generous support of donors to help underwrite part of the course, student fees end up being for travel end up being under $3,000. The tuition for an Allen term course is $990. The students do online coursework to prepare for the experience, so it's more than just traveling to Germany. Andrew and I have coursework that they do the entire Allen term. and it's open to all majors. Both classes are open to all majors, so students in any major can participate in this. I talked at the beginning a little about COVID and the COVID testing, which was everywhere in Germany and free. You can get tested as many times a day as you want, and it doesn't cost you anything. I would also say that another cultural difference that really struck me was the emphasis on electric vehicles, bicycles. You see moms in town with very young children, and their bicycles got a special sort of enclosed cab on the front, so even if it's raining, the baby in the front isn't getting wet. Or we saw a mom in Stuttgart that had a bicycle with a big sort of platform on the back, and she had 3 different children sitting on the back of the bicycle on this platform, and it was low wheel, so they weren't really high up, but they were riding with mom while she was shopping. People have always, from when I lived in Europe 40 years ago, people brought their own bags to the store. They didn't have plastic bags that we did. Recycling has always been very big in Europe. Having pedestrian zones in the middle of large cities that's walking only is a major difference. One thing that struck me, I knew that the Germans were big on recycling and they were not fans of plastic packaging. But the last morning that we were there, we couldn't eat breakfast in our hotel, so they gave us breakfast boxes to go. And in the US, if you get a breakfast to go or take out food, there'll be a little plastic package, and it'll have a plastic fork and plastic knife and plastic spoon and a napkin. We didn't get that in our to-go box. Was a cardboard box, recyclable, had the food inside, and wrapped in brown paper were your eating utensils. And it was actually a metal fork, spoon, and knife. And they weren't fancy at all. They were stamped, but they were rugged. And then there was a note on the packaging that you could either recycle them with metal or you could wash them and reuse them. And I kept mine, and I'm using it in my camping gear because it's quite functional silverware. So there isn't the same sort of disposable attitude. There's much more of a reuse attitude in Germany. So Andrew or students, any other? Well, let's first ask CJ. Did you get your mic fixed?
Hopefully I did.
Oh, let me go back up to your slides then.
I'm going to assume it did.
Pardon me for a second while I get this back. Okay, you're up.
Right. Let's try this again. So my name is CJ. I'm a senior mechanical engineer. I've got 3 or 4 minors, depending on what day of the week it is. But I do a little bit of business, a little bit of materials, a little bit of everything. I went on this trip only because I wanted to travel, and I like just the entire German auto basis, and not because I needed to take the course. So I had a little bit different of a background coming into this. This is just the first picture of the castle that overlooks Heidenheim. I think this was one of the many, many times that we had diplomatic relations with our German students. We went out with them almost every night, hung out. That was one of the things that wasn't on the itinerary and kind of surprised everybody, was just how quickly we made friends with these German students. I mean, every night there was 24 of us traveling around in a big pack, finding somewhere else to go hang out. They asked us about our lives. We asked about theirs. And truly, it was the only way that you could ever understand Germany any better than a book and being told it. Next. So this is just a picture of the bottom of the Mercedes Museum. To reiterate what Charlie said, it's a shame that I didn't get to take any pictures of the factory, because that's just a dance routine, honestly. It was an incredible trip for engineers more than for mechanical engineers more than you might even expect, just because every single place we went, there was just massive amounts of engineering going on. Mercedes will never let you forget that they invented the first car. They will never let you forget that one. But this is just some of the racing history. There was history everywhere you looked. There was engineering everywhere, of course. It was an incredible trip for people beyond just business and history. Next. So this is just a picture from inside the Porsche Museum. This honestly deserves to be an art gallery by itself. The building's architecture is just incredible on top of the cool cars inside. I didn't attach the picture, but of course the coolest car was Sally from Pixar's Cars that they had there, life size. Again, the Porsche Museum was just gorgeous. I mean, just looking at it, the German people were just incredibly friendly. You could walk up to any car and they would open it up for you. There was plenty of cars that you could even get into and take your pictures in. For as much as we looked at cars, we spent a lot of our time on our feet. Still got the blisters to prove it. I might have one more slide. We'll see.
That was your last slide, Charlie. That was the last one. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. And then we went off to cold Miami. It was terrible.
Yeah, that's your memory of Miami. So anybody else, any of the folks that presented have any last wrap-ups or comments, or we can open it up to questions. We've got, looks like about 12 minutes till a mandatory stop.
So I would like to say one thing. One of the things that was a huge difference when we got to Germany, like instantly, it was so much more quiet. Like it was shocking how quiet the cities were, how quiet the airport was. And it was wonderful. I truly enjoyed that aspect because I thought it was just so nice to be able to think and just admire everything going on. But that was probably one of my favorite, like, major differences is just how quiet German cities are. It was just wonderful.
Mark, Gary asked a question in the chat, which I'll read. It was directed to Paul, but anyone can address it. He said, you mentioned your visit to Dachau, and Dean Lewis noted that German students joined you in some classes. Did you have an opportunity to talk to the students about the Nazi period? Because their grandparents were part and parcel of that experience. If yes, how would you describe the way that they handle that history?
I'll let the students answer that.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, I think I messaged you about that, but I myself did not actually answer that question. I think it may have been someone else in the class. Liz, I'm pretty sure is you who asked about this, but from what I can remember, a lot of the students that we were with when we were talking about the subject, they were very, very open about it. They knew, obviously, the details of what happened, and they completely understood that this is cemented in German history. This is like almost a cornerstone for them. So I didn't see any like, oh, we keep it on like the down low. We're hush hush about it. They were like, well, yes, we know what happened. We're not going to deny it.
More questions?
Can I just make a comment that kind of brings us again back to the history side of all of this? I visited, well, I worked in Hamburg way back in 1960. That's only 15 years after the war ended. And I visited Stuttgart for a weekend. Drove from Hamburg to Stuttgart, which is across the country. The people I was working with in Hamburg were shocked that I would have done that. Only an American would have driven that far in one weekend, they said. But what I was struck with, certainly in both cities, was how little evidence, this is only 15 years after the war ended, how little physical evidence there was of the war. Hamburg had been rebuilt. Stuttgart had been rebuilt. There were a few memorials, like a church in Hamburg that had been bombed out and that remained as a memorial to the war, but otherwise very little sign of that. When I took a class to Munich just a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, we learned that Munich had been over 80% flattened by American and by British bombers during the war. Nuremberg, which we visited, 90% destroyed during the war. And once again, very, very little physical evidence. Did you folks, as you're visiting the, Stuttgart especially, but also Munich, did you see any other evidence? Did you talk to people about the degree to which these cities had been, rebuilt, kind of a new Germany?
So I will say one of the buildings that we passed had bullet holes in it from World War II, which was very interesting to see. I believe it was some kind of government building, and that was really interesting. And also, I will say, I tried to talk to some of the German students about what they would consider being not good to talk about when it comes to World War II and everything that happened. And they were like, yeah, our generation's really open about it. If you talk to the older generation, they're not going to be as forthcoming about it. They're going to try to be like, oh, we don't really talk about it. But I mean, the German students that I talked to, they said that every German student in grade school will go to a concentration camp and learn about what happened, whether that would be, going to Auschwitz, Dachau, or any of the numerous other concentration camps. They all learn the history so that they don't repeat it. And they're very proud to, be able to say that.
Yeah, Gary, right before we got there in Munich, they were digging up some things under the rail lines just within a week before we got to Munich. And 4 people were injured when a unexploded ordnance from World War II detonated right on the trail or rail lines right into Munich. So, yeah, it's still, even if you don't see it, it's ever present. Philip has a question. Philip Rich.
Thank you, Professor Kless. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Gary. And Gary, I appreciated your question very much, as I'm interested in the Holocaust. I have a question. I'm from the class of 1976. And I have a question. Did anybody go to any musical events, such as the opera or the symphony? Or was there just simply not enough time to imagine that one should put that in the itinerary?
The itinerary was totally jam-packed. I would love to be able to fit that into an evening if there was one in Heidenheim or Stuttgart or Munich. I think it would be a wonderful cultural event. But we haven't found that fit yet.
I'll accept that.
There's no opera or anything, but the last night in Munich when we had our dinner, we had that bar going off the rails.
I didn't get that last time. You had what going off the rails?
We had that bar and restaurant going off the rails.
Oh, it was really very, very lively then.
Yeah, the entire place was filled, and as we approached the end of the night, because everything closed at 10 p.m. due to COVID, they started putting on Sweet Caroline, I think they even put on Country Roads or something. I forget what they put on. They put on some really American music.
New York.
That's all right. Yeah, that was the other one.
New York.
And
they knew we were in the house, so some special music was put on for us.
We started screaming it. The Germans were screaming it. A couple glasses got broken. People were standing on tables. It was one of a kind.
Well, thank you.
I have a question for Mark.
Yes, Emrys.
Which is, do you think there's any chance that from this sort of thing, there might be the possibility of exchange programs between our students and the kind of students you met?
I think there absolutely is a possibility of an exchange. We have a semi-official relationship with the university, but I think that we have in the past had students from Heidenheim come visit Alfred for a few days and then we visit them. That's as far as it's gone now, but it may be possible to make some kind of exchange arrangement. I think that would be very interesting. One other comment that I would like to make is special thanks to Provost Drobi for letting us do this class in the time of COVID. We were very concerned about how we could make sure that we were as safe as possible. We also gave the students the option, as Omicron started picking up, we gave the students the option that if they chose to, they could drop the course, and we'd give them a full refund. But if they wanted to go ahead and go for it, then we would go. And every single student said, no, we want to travel, we want to take the course. And we provided fresh N95 or KN95 masks daily for each student. Before AU began issuing them, we did that. We had the students all boosted. We did everything we could to make sure that we were taking every possible precaution, but at the same time, getting out and getting an experience. So I'm really glad that we had the ability to do this, and I'm really thankful for the students following through and watching out for their safety and the safety of their classmates. It was a great first experience out after all this COVID restrictions.
Okay.
Well, one more thanks quickly to Laura Johnson in Study Abroad, who helped us get this off the ground and then was in the background when our flights were changing and all of that. So Beth Ann, Laura, yeah, both of them made this happen.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. I forgot to mention Laura, without whom this would never have happened.
Well, it sounds like a tremendous advert for these kind of courses and for global studies and study abroad and all the rest of it. And so thank you to Mark and to Andrew, to Liz, Paul, Charlie, and CJ for a really fascinating presentation. And I'll just say personally, I thought the photographs were fantastic. There's some talented photographers there. Okay, thank you everyone, and see you next week.